Welcome back. So this is the second part of looking at teaching strategies. We've already covered expository and hands-on. Now we're moving on to the interactive approach. So let's do a quick demo. Have you ever participated in a class discussion, participated in group work, studied with a classmate to try to help each other learn, or benefited from just talking with someone about your classwork? If so, and I'm sure we can all raise our hand on these, you have participated in an interactive teaching approach. The reason why teachers want to use these is whenever you want your students to talk and to exchange ideas with one another, or even to talk and exchange ideas with you. You can probably guess already, this relates to Lev Vygotsky. So remember Lev Vygotsky's idea of social constructivism? According to him, the way we learn best is by interacting and talking with one another. That idea that two heads are better than one. So there are a variety of different types. We'll start with class discussions. So you use a class discussion when you want the students to really analyze, dig deeper into the information, to be able to summarize, see common themes, see similarities and differences, and to evaluate their personal views. Those are some of the reasons why you want to use a class discussion. The types of topics that work best, well, I've given you some clip art over here to give you some ideas. Controversial topics work well because typically if it's controversial, you're going to have more than one point of view. So if instead my topic is something like why education is beneficial, well, I'm pretty sure we all agree that education is beneficial. But if instead my topic is Common Core and whether or not Common Core is beneficial, I bet there are some of you that think it is and some of you that may think it isn't. That gives us something to talk about. Other topics that work well are ones that are difficult or novel. Novel means something challenging but also like a new idea. Common Core could fit under that idea of novel. Also attitudes and values, because again you're going to be having something where students have different points of view and they have something to discuss. And they have an opinion or a judgment. When it comes to class discussions, here are some tips to try to get it to work well. You want to make sure that your students are prepared. They have to have background knowledge or something in their head ahead of time in order to be able to discuss it. So I couldn't walk into a third grade class and say, let's discuss immigration law. They probably don't know anything about it, and it's probably too difficult for them. So you want to make sure the students are prepared. You want to make sure that during the discussion, when questions are being addressed to you, that you address them back to other students, that it doesn't just become you talking with individual students. That is not a discussion. They need to be talking with one another as well. So for instance, if some things you could say like, Stacy, what do you think of John's idea? Or that's an important question, Eve. Does anyone have a thought on how to answer that? To try to encourage them to talk with one another. Here's a quick video talking about the teacher's role in these discussions.
They're looking at the question of the freedmen after the war in the context of the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's role, the slave's self-emancipation.
What about the people who passed these laws? What do you expect from these people? But what should have been done with the people who passed these laws?
There may be times when a kid says something and another kid wants to respond to it immediately, and they're supposed to wait, but you sort of feel like the dialogue between the two kids has to happen. You have to be able to let that, to sort of cast out the line a little bit and then reel it back in so that not everybody's jumping in.
You should be able to reap the benefits of something you were trying to destroy a couple weeks ago. That's not right.
Part of the war was to keep the union together. You can't have a country together when you're pushing away half of it.
Right. No, the thing is the white.
No, I'm talking about
the white people.
But the white people weren't important like the white people were. It's a sad thing to say, but it's true. You have to keep the union together. You have to have the Congress and senators from, the other states. You have to have representatives, and even if they did not agree with what you wanted or like what you wanted for the country or whatever, you still have to have it, or else there would be no union. What's the point? What's the point of having a war over keeping them together if you're going to push them out after it's over?
1903. Go ahead, Stephanie.
If you keep those same people in power, the same people that started the first recession, and you give them
So you can see from that video, and I apologize if some of that was hard to hear, that the teacher has a pretty important role in those class discussions to keep it on track, to let students say what they need to say, make sure everyone can hear it, and so on. Something else you want to do, and I just mentioned this, try to keep things on topic. It's real easy for things to go astray, for tangents to occur, or too many personal stories. You want to make sure that you keep things on track. And you need to also ask for clarity or more information. Sometimes a student might have a good idea, but maybe they haven't articulated it well, or maybe they've been pretty brief, so you want to try to elicit some details or some comments from them. Some examples when it comes to asking for clarity, things like, Beth, I think this is what you're saying, is that correct? Or ask, could you summarize what this student just said? When it comes to probing for more information, you could say, well, do you have any evidence or facts to back up that claim or assertion? Or you could say, how did you reach that conclusion? You also want to really try to encourage everyone to participate, and that is a very hard thing, which is why I said that oftentimes you need a small class, 10 to 15, to really pull off a good whole class group discussion. And I don't want to leave out the fact that debates can also be included. So a discussion, one form of that is a debate. There are various ways that you can structure your whole class discussion. It could be everyone talking about one topic or people choosing sides. And also, we can't forget the fact that we have technology-based discussions, and again, especially during 2020, these have been quite helpful when you can't be face-to-face, whether it is a discussion forum or Zoom. And of course, I couldn't help but add a few funnies in there because we've all had various experiences when it comes to Zoom and online kinds of interactive work. All right, so another interactive approach is teacher questioning. And this is a great one because you can embed this with other strategies. You can stick this into your lecture. You can stick this into your hands-on approaches. It's a great tool for keeping students cognitively engaged during lessons. And remember, if we go back to intrinsic motivation and the need for cognitive arousal, that can be something helpful. Here's a quick video to give you some more detail when it comes to teacher questioning.
How can a teacher plan and construct questions that will help students both retain knowledge and increase their cognitive skills?
Good questioning gets students thinking about the activity that they're going to begin. It brings out topics from other students that the rest of the class gets to hear about, and focus on where we're going with this activity. And based on my questions, I can, without giving them answers, guide them in the direction of where we're going and what I want them to be thinking about. What I want to hear from you are ideas that you have or what you think about when you think of weapons of the Middle Ages.
At tournaments and when they would joust and everything, they would start on their horses with the lance and they would try to knock each other off the horse, and then they'd start fighting with the swords.
So again, that idea that you do need to think in ahead of time and plan your questions to have good questions. Now, there are different functions. There are different reasons why you might use teacher questioning. And so while you're planning, you need to ask yourself, what is the purpose of my questions? I can use them for practice, because if I'm asking questions and students are practicing with the course content, that can be helpful when it comes to learning. I can use them to identify gaps in my students' knowledge. So if I'm asking questions to assess, okay, what do they already know, or what have or haven't they learned? I can also use it to simply provoke curiosity in my students to get them to be interested or want to learn more about the content. You might recall that that relates to the idea of inducing cognitive conflict from Piaget's method. There are three parts of a good teacher question. So first of all, you need to focus on the initiation, asking the question. You want to plan in advance. You might notice that in my videos, I have questions come up in the video. That helps me remember them. That helps me to stop and take that moment to ask the question. It lets you see it. I also do that in my face-to-face classes so that I don't forget to induce these questions. When it comes to the initiation part and when you're planning them, you also want to make sure that you're asking different types of questions. You're going to have convergent questions where there's one right answer. That is best used when you want to assess whether or not they truly understand something, kind of like a practice assessment. But then you have divergent questions like, can you give me an example of? I use a lot of those because that way there's many possible right answers. Students are more likely to want to answer, and it starts a little bit of a discussion because you'll have more than one person that can answer the question. So you might ask yourself, and I kind of already answered this, why would teachers ask divergent questions? And again, sorry if I already answered that, but it does encourage students to answer them. It does encourage some higher level thinking. Especially the creative kind of thinking, as well as application, and it does promote some discussion. All right, other types of questions. You can also think about whether you want your questions to be lower level or higher level. For this, think about Bloom's taxonomy. I've got the diagram of it over there. Lower level questions are easier. So can anyone remember the dates that Columbus discovered America? Can someone give me the name of the scientist who discovered the polio vaccine? Easier. It lets you know whether or not the students learned something that perhaps you just taught them. Higher level questions, and those are going to be based more on the top 4 layers of Bloom's taxonomy. Let them go beyond what you have taught them and either apply it to something new, analyze and evaluate it, give their opinion on it, or create something new. It helps them, again, engage in those higher level thinking skills. So you want to think about what level of question do you want. Lower level, if I were to ask based on this video that you've just watched, I could say what types of topics work best with class discussions. We just covered that like 5 minutes ago. Or give me an example of a good discussion topic for a history class. That's higher level because you'd have to apply what you know about, okay, what topics work best, how would that relate to a history class, what's something new I could come up with. All right, so initiation is one part. Another part is the response part, the student's response. Okay, so yes, you have to pose the question, then you have to wait for the students to respond. And I love this meme when the teacher asks a question and you're trying to avoid eye contact because you don't want to answer. You must wait a minimum of 5 seconds. Now you might think that doesn't sound very long. Studies have shown that on average, teachers wait less than 1 second before they answer it themselves. So you've got to wait that 5 seconds. You've got to decide how you're going to call on your students. Do you just want to pose the question and see who volunteers? Or do you want to call on them by name?
Who can tell me a little bit about the Battle of Hastings? No! You put your hands down! 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 I will kill you! Do you understand me? Anyone else?
Okay, sorry, that comes from Robot Chicken, which is a hilarious show. But that also brings to the point, when you're thinking about how you're going to, call on your students, you will have some students that constantly have their hand up and they want to answer every single question. Obviously, that is not the way to respond to that, but you do want to think about how to handle that. So it's not always the same student or the same 5 students answering your questions. There are some things you can do. There are actually some apps out there. For instance, this one here is an app that you can put on your iPhone, your iPad, that will randomly pull up a student's name, and that can be who answers. You can go more old school and use the popsicle sticks with students' names and draw them out. So again, that way everyone is answering. And there are also some other apps you can use as well. Then thirdly is the reaction. So you can't just let them answer the question and move on. You have to react to it. You can give them praise if they've answered it well and done a good job. You could let them know, acknowledge, and reinforce that. You could restate. So if what they said is really good and you want to make sure the other students heard it as well, rephrase it, restate it, say it louder so that everyone can hear. You could correct. So perhaps what they've given you is partially right, or perhaps it's all incorrect. You want to correct, so you're not spreading misinformation. And you might also want to expand on their answer. You might want to say, that's great, and also keep in mind, blah, 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 and expand upon it. All right, our last category, I'm pretty sure, for interactive approaches is cooperative learning. So I had to include this meme because we've all been in those group projects before where one person does pretty much all the work and everyone else has a variety of different types of roles. Okay, cooperative learning is what we call this. This is the whole point of cooperative learning is having students work together to achieve some sort of common goal. It should be a type of project where they need each other. They need more than one person to accomplish this. So lots of examples. So here we have some social studies projects that were posted on social media. When you're doing this, it is not just putting students in groups. So you can't just say, okay, group, here's your homework assignment or here's some problems I want you to solve. That's not necessarily cooperative learning. In fact, here's a video I want to show you that's a bad example, but it was on an instructional video to use in a class like this one labeled as group work, but it's not. I want you to think about why it's not a good example.
How would you like to break them up? Well, you can go every third question. Like you would take number 1 and Eric would do number 2, she would do number 3. Or you can take it and say you do the first 6 and let Eric do the next 6 and she can do 1 through 8. How would you like to break it up?
All right, why is that not a good approach? Let's go backwards a second before we go forwards. Remember, when students work together to achieve a common goal, the only common goal they're achieving in that video is getting the homework done. I call that approach divide and conquer, where I say, I do the odd numbers, you do the even numbers. We don't end up with the same level of learning at the end of that because I only know what I did and you only know what you did, and we didn't actually even have to talk to each other. So cooperative learning needs more than that. There are some potential problems with cooperative learning. Some students will talk too much and end up just having it be social time. They're not going to be learning or meeting your class goals if all they're doing is getting together and chit-chatting. Also, studies have found those students who do all the work for the group, those are the only ones who really learn from it. That's obviously a problem, like Jim here. And students can share mistakes. So if you're not really being very hands-on as an instructor, as a group, they can start to develop misconceptions and share them among one another, and that's also not helpful. So what can you do to make better cooperative learning? First of all, plan your groups ahead of time. It's not always a good idea to let students choose their own groups. I would plan on 3 to 4 is the best size for a small group project, and you want to have diverse membership in your groups. I remember once I was teaching at a small community college outside of Memphis, Tennessee, a very diverse school. And it was one of my first days of teaching. I said, okay, go ahead and get in groups and we're going to do a project. And I turned around to get my classroom materials. When I turned back around, the groups were completely 100% racially segregated. And I thought, oh, that is not how I want my groups to be. I want diverse groups. So from then on, I plan my groups, whether you do a count off 1, 2, 3, 4, or however you want to do it. You want to make sure that there is a clear and common goal. They know what they're supposed to do, and by a common goal, meaning they have to work together to meet it. Here's a short video to help with this.
Was Simon the one that he was apologizing to? Yeah.
Cooperative grouping also promotes teamwork, problem solving, and joint decision making, all important skills later on in life. It's important to establish clearly to the group what their objectives are and what role each of them will play. They may want to pick their roles themselves, depending on their age.
We like working in groups because it's more fun, and then that's the way we get more ideas. Yeah, we usually don't never get to pick the groups, but I like working with people because I've been working with them the whole year, so I got to know them. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, that they're just not supposed to be sitting down and just like watching. Everybody takes part in it.
And it certainly sounds like they're doing it in a very effective way if everyone knows their role and is doing their job. You also might want to consider having behavior guidelines, especially with younger students. You might need to clearly specify, okay, before we get in our groups and do our group work, here are some things we need to do. That is a great way to try to prevent misbehaviors. You want to make sure that the students need each other for success. If the project isn't that big and one person really can't do it themselves, oftentimes that is what's going to happen. So it has to be something suitable for 3 to 4 students that need to work together. You might also want to consider some sort of accountability. And you can see an example over to the side here of an accountability form, a peer evaluation. Whether you want to create one yourself or there are a variety of examples you can find online, it is nice to have that extra piece of accountability. And you yourself need to play a role. You don't just give them the work and disappear. You are a resource. That means you have information and things that they need. You make sure you go around and provide the resources, and you monitor. You monitor to keep them on track. You monitor to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing.
Then what's going to happen is I'm going to come through and do your progress reports just like we did last week. Okay, so I will be coming in and meeting with each team to see where you are and to sort of talk about your teamwork, to talk about what kinds of things you may still need, if there are any resources you're missing, and also to begin to talk about your visual presentation. Okay, Ms. Basilisi will be in here, okay, to answer other questions that you guys may have. Art and architecture, you guys may go to your spot. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I know you guys have some questions. I have a spot down here for questions, so let's run through the top. And then when we get to the questions that you guys have, then we'll answer them. Does that sound fair? Okay, materials. Do you guys find that you have enough materials to answer the questions that you need?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so you're looking for more information on tunes?
Yeah, because we don't have tunes.
Okay, I know where I can find that for you, and I also know you've actually looked through one book that does have some information on tunes, the Greeks book, the one that we have multiple copies. What you need to do is maybe assign some jobs for people, okay? And sometimes that works well. I know when I sit down and have a job to get done, and there are a lot of people there, we assign. We say, this is what you're going to do, this is what I'm going to do. So team leader, that's part of your responsibility, okay?
Pretty good.
So you can certainly see where that teacher is doing a good job of both those roles, providing resources and monitoring and keeping them on track. All right, before we're going to be done, I thought I'd ask a few wrap-up questions to help make sure that you've understood what we've covered so far. So, Ms. Jones wants to review the class materials from last week and see how much her students can easily recall. What strategy would work best for this? What do you think? If you are thinking teacher questioning, you're right. That would be the quickest and most effective way of just quickly seeing, okay, what do we recall? What do we know? Mr. Jackson has to present a large amount of information on the Civil War to get his 11th grade students caught up this week. What strategy would work best? Tick tock, tick tock. If you're thinking lecturing, you're right, because here are the keys. 11th grade, so they're old enough for that to work well. It's a large amount of information, and he needs to get them caught up. Lecturing would work best. Mr. Kelly wants his students to learn how to work with each other to complete a difficult project. What strategy would work best? If you're thinking cooperative learning, you're right, and the whole key there is work with each other. All right, so that's it on instructional strategies. Thank you for your attention, and I will catch you next time.